Good evening, everybody. Welcome to tonight's special episode of Talking Elite here on the All Elite Zone podcast. I am your host, the Bearded Nugget, in honor of our good hero, Owen Hart. Tonight's episode is dedicated to him as this is the 25th year of his passing since we lost probably one of the best technical wrestlers in the world in 1999. So tonight we are going to honor him as I am wearing my Owen Hart shirt in honor of the man. Thank you all for joining me tonight. It's going to be a very maybe good sentimental, maybe good remembrance episode. I'm very excited to present it. As you can see, starting off by myself, which is fine. I'm okay with that. We're going to get more people involved. So hopefully they will be on soon. But until then, I will guide you through this first part of the show. And always hydrate. It's always a good thing. Anyways, again, thank you guys for joining us tonight. It is episode 71. We are cruising right through these episodes, really, and very excited to talk about tonight. First, let me give you guys my reviews of Dynamite. As you know, it was last night, and we always do our reviews of Dynamites on Thursdays. For me, it was an okay episode. There were some hit or misses on last night's episode of Dynamite. I did like the O'Reilly Malachi Black match. That was a good match. I did like the tag match that started it off. Obviously, the triple threat match for just determining the FTW opponent for Jericho on Sunday. I don't know if I predicted what if all men like reached the limit and it's a fatal four-way. I was close. It's a triple threat. It's a three-way dance. So I was close on that. Other than that, it was an okay episode. I wish they would build more towards that TBS title, or maybe have given Mercedes one match with her return and not just throw her in a pay-per-view. But that's neither here nor there. So, but that's pretty much my take on Dynamite. So hopefully everybody else enjoyed it. Oh, wait. We have to get to the big thing. The build-up for Double or Nothing, obviously, from Dynamite last night. Obviously, the main event spot with the Elite beating on Bryan Danielson and the awkward spot of Tony Khan driving back with Darby Allin and Darby Allin with the flamethrower. Interesting spot, a very interesting spot for Tony Khan to do as well. I don't know whose idea that was, but it was very interesting. It is very, very funny to me. I think the ladies put on a great tag match. I think they did very well there. But overall, I think the build for Double or Nothing is getting there. We've gotten more matches added on. Oh, and the big thing for me last night was Death Triangle reuniting. I love Death Triangle. I love Pac, Penta, and Ray. Love the fact that they're back together and they're challenging the Bang Bang Gang for the trios titles. Want to see those titles actually mean something again. I know we talked about how they were introduced and they've barely been used. So very excited to see where those trios titles go. And hopefully they really build on those moving on. So that's kind of my review of Dynamite last night. So as for tonight's episode, again, this is going to get emotional. It might get sentimental. But we are talking about the 25th anniversary of Owen Hart. We did lose Owen Hart 25 years ago. If a lot of people were alive back then, I know I was. I was actually watching the pay-per-view of his passing, and it was very surreal to me. So I think this is just a good time to kind of remember him as the wrestling world has over the past 25 years, especially most recently AEW with the Owen Hart tournament. I think for men and women. So I think it's a really good thing to remember someone like Owen Hart, as he was actually a big part of my childhood in professional wrestling from his time with, hold on. There we go. Hey, we got Danny. Danny, how's it going tonight?
It's going. How are you?
I'm good. So I'm just starting the show off, just giving my review of Dynamite, about to get in the topic tonight. Before we do that, how about you? Do you want to give a review of Dynamite before we get to our topic tonight?
Actually, yeah. I was just finished watching it and I learned that I have to adjust my DVR because it cut off right as the Bucks came out. So and then it flipped to Dynamite 515, which would have been, yeah, like last week's Dynamite. And I'm thinking, was this a continuation of another show? And I'm like, oh, I need to flip it. But yeah, it wasn't bad. The only question I have, Adam, tonight, why does Nick Wayne have TV time? Tell me. I don't get it. Where's Wardlow? We need Wardlow. It's just it was a pretty good show. The one thing that I thought was interesting is the spot that they put Swerve in. Like they could have saved that like towards the end and maybe moved Daniel Bryan up a little bit, but I thought that was kind of interesting. But other than that, it was a pretty good show. I especially like the Serena Deeb hitting Tony Storm with the shoe because it's chin up, out, and watch the shoes. I thought that was classic.
Yeah, and I actually just gave that. I thought the women gave a great tag match. I didn't think it was a bad tag match. I did mention that the story buildup between Willow and Mercedes could be a lot better than what it has been. I did mention the feud. I did mention the O'Reilly and Malachi Black match. I did kind of enjoy that one. The reuniting of Death Triangle. Very excited for that.
Yeah.
I had mentioned just now before you came on here to everybody, but I'll re-say it that I'm very glad they're back together and actually going for the trios titles and make those titles mean something again.
Yeah.
So I mean, it wasn't a bad show. It was some awkward, like weird spots and everything like that. So I don't know if it did its job of building up towards Double or Nothing, but we did get a couple more matches added to it. So I'm sure a few of those will be moved to the 0 hour. Build up to the actual pay-per-view.
Yeah.
So go ahead. It sounds like you wanted to.
Yeah. The other thing, Tony Khan, if you're listening or have people that are listening or have people that are listening, keep with tradition. Move All In up on the calendar and keep All Out where it is. I'm just I don't want to say Adam disappointed, but we're stunned because we had All Out weekend planned that we were, going to head down to Chicago on Thursday this time. Because last year when we went, we left on Friday and we were just overwhelmed, just like with driving with traffic and et cetera, so forth. And so we had some things that we were planning on doing. And then for All Out to be pushed back a week because supposedly fans were complaining they're, All In and All Out are too close together. Keep All In if you must, eliminate one of the other pay-per-views, move it up in the calendar, but keep with tradition.
Right. No, I agree. I think they're too close together. I think you do need that separation because you don't have much time after All In to build up for All Out. It's almost like you're getting rushed to make a card for All Out.
Yeah. And I also felt last year too, being it was our first All In, it was great. And I had seen somebody in one of the, I don't remember where it was, it might have been one of the social media groups that said that there was no magic to All Out last year. That's kind of how I felt. I thought it was a good card. I really liked it. However, I felt like it was also just in a hyped up version of Dynamite Collision and Rampage mixed.
Right. And I'm gonna actually get to some of Jason's comments here.
Oh yeah, hey Jason.
I agree with Jason. I do think creatively, I think Tony does need that help, but we've been pushing it on the show that they need to sign Scott D'Amore. I honestly think they need to. And Jason said he's glad they moved All Out, which is fine. I mean, I still think it's too close together. If they can push it another month out, then you can build another good card for it. But other than that, I think right now, again, I talked with Matt on Tuesday on the Canada show that, we're predicting Double or Nothing matches and, we could be hit or miss. It could be a great card or it could be a pay-per-view where it wasn't the best pay-per-view, but it wasn't bad.
Right.
We can be completely wrong and be blown out of our seats. But I do agree that last night's episode was okay. It wasn't great. It could have been a better go home show for a pay-per-view, but I'm excited for Double or Nothing as it is basically the 5th anniversary of their very first show of
Right.
what they did. So when they created. So other than that, we're going to move on. As I was saying, tonight's episode, we're dedicating it to the 25th anniversary of the passing of Owen Hart, one of the founding members of the Hart family dynasty that was professional wrestling in the 90s. Obviously, it was a weird moment for me because I had said was watching that pay-per-view. I actually ordered it and I was watching it from home. I'm showing my age here, and I remember being a kid and being 12 and watching that and going, what is going on? Like, this is unnormal with, Jim Ross. And when he announced, Owen had passed, I was like, wait, what?
Mm-hmm.
It just blew my mind. So do you remember where you were, Danny, the night of this pay-per-view of when Owen passed?
Yeah, I was actually living in the same city that I'm in now in Wisconsin, and oh gosh, I was on the internet, and kids who are listening, just FYI, this was when the internet was in the infancy stages. Yes, there was once upon a time when I had to survive without this. Oh, and by the way, let's also look at my screensaver. There he is. So yeah, I had to survive without this, and I had to survive without Alexa and a tablet. And I remember I had the dial-up internet that made that sound when you had to dial it up. And I don't remember, Adam, specifically if I was watching the pay-per-view. I may have been. I don't remember. But I might have just been, on the internet. I think I might have been playing a game actually, and something just told me to check in on Lords of Pain. Of course, hi Tito, if you're listening, Virtue, no DQ. Also Aaron Rift as well. And I was always following Mr. Tito back then when he was on Lords of Pain.
I remember Mr. Tito. Yep.
Yeah, I remember something told me to check, and I'm like, Owen Hart, wait, what? And I was like, my jaw just hit the floor. Like, I did not think that this was a real thing. And it took a few minutes for me to process that what had happened, and then even more to process that he was gone. And this was a thing, I think, that the day, there's a song called The Day the Music Died, obviously when Buddy Holly got in that plane crash, this could be considered one of the day that pro wrestling died, because Owen, you go back and watch those episodes of Raw on the network. Owen was hilarious as a heel. I could not see a face Owen. I could only see heel Owen, and he was even funnier when he had Jim Cornette with him.
Yeah, no, I agree. I remember the Lords of Pain websites too. Growing up, I mean, that's where I would read quite a bit of stuff too if I missed it.
Yeah.
And yeah, I was the same way. The Raw after was very rough for me. I think that was, out of all the Raws of remembering wrestlers, I think there's only been 3 that I actually like really teared up and like was emotional. It was that one for Owen. It was Eddie in 05, and then it was actually just recently Bray Wyatt. So
yeah,
I think it's funny because people were like, you didn't know these people, but it's like, well, we kind of did. They were on our television every week, and they entertained us. They were almost like part of our lives.
Yeah.
And so I'm with you on that. It's, you get shocked when you read about someone like an Owen Hart who, to this day, even when he was alive, no one has never said a bad thing about him and said he was great to work with, very friendly, happy all the time, never down, And so it was just a shocker of when it happened. And I think a lot of people just want to remember the good times of Owen Hart. So, but to know Owen Hart, I mean, we have to go back. I mean, we have to go back to the Hart family. And obviously, Owen being the youngest of 11 kids, being the baby. Like me, I'm the baby of 4. So, yeah, so it's, him growing into it. And actually, some of his earliest career moves in professional wrestling, I believe he was actually a amateur wrestler, like majority of the Hart family. And made some weight classes and won some awards. Obviously, he was fourth at the 84 Canada West Championships at 76 kilograms. It wasn't his first choice, actually. Martha actually said in a book, Broken Hearts, he numerous times to be outside of wrestling. So that's the question now is, what outside of wrestling could you have seen Owen if we never got Owen Hart in professional wrestling?
I kind of see that where you're coming from, because if you watch the Randy Orton biography, which I actually watched like 4 times, it was so good. And Orton, when he after he joined the Marine and he skipped out or something, he said in that biography that he was laying in bed and didn't know what to do. And initially he didn't want to get into wrestling. And of course his dad made some phone calls and the rest is history. I think Owen, if he didn't go into wrestling, he had such a technique that's kind of like Shawn Michaels. What they say that Michaels can just do it and it's easier for him to do it than teach it. I feel like Owen would have been a great producer or even a great coach backstage if he would have said, you know what, I like the idea of pro wrestling, but I don't like the travel schedule. Because think about, when you're in WWE, you're on the road at least 250 to 300 days a year. If he didn't want the travel schedule, which is understandable, I think he would have been great as some sort of producer or even a technical coach.
Yeah, I think also, according to the book, she says he could have made profitable living outside of wrestling. So if it wasn't wrestling, I can see Owen as almost like sales. I think Owen Hart probably would have done remarkable in sales no matter where the sales job was. It seems like he was a happy-go-lucky guy who was like talking to people and all that stuff.
Sure.
I don't think it's weird to imagine what the world of professional wrestling, especially the WWF at that time, would have been if Owen wasn't there. And I think back to all the matches that we wouldn't have had if Owen wasn't. We wouldn't have had that magnificent brother versus brother match at WrestleMania between him and Brett. We wouldn't have the whole 2-time Slammy Award picture. Again, we wouldn't have an image of this in our lives if Owen Hart had chosen a career outside of pro wrestling. I understand that it was possible. But unfortunately, like it says, he was in the Hart family, so it was almost inevitable. Obviously, he trained with his father in the Hart Dungeon and went on to wrestle for him in Stampede Wrestling. And he actually wrestled in England for the Max Crabtree's joint promotions. He also dabbled a little bit in New Japan. New Japan Pro Wrestling in '87. He wrestled Yamada and then Justin Liger. Well, actually, he wrestled Yamada before Yamada debuted the Justin Liger character. So he's got that history. But yeah, he wouldn't debut in the WWF until 1988 and 89. Mm-hmm. And he was there only for that time period, having wrestling so many matches. Can you remember the earliest match you've seen in Owen Hart's career when he did the WWF for like his first run?
From what I remember, yes, he was. I remember watching an episode of Primetime. You guys know that I will sit there and watch Primetime over and over again just for the comedy between Monsoon and Heenan. Forget the matches. It's just the interaction between those two. And I remember Owen Hart being dressed as the Blue Blazer in the late 80s, early 90s. Specifically, I remember I'm watching Primetime now, and I'm on the story arc where Heenan had the neck brace where he was attacked by Ken Patera. And I still remember, it was sometime around 88, but I don't remember specifically when, but I do remember seeing Owen Hart as the Blue Blazer.
Yeah, that was actually when they decided to put him in the Blue Blazer gimmick to start off his career, and he had the likes against, I believe he wrestled, Terry Gibbs, Barry Horowitz, and then he wrestled during the Survivor Series. I know he wrestled a couple of WrestleManias, the Blue Meanie. I think he wrestled WrestleMania 5 and he lost to Mr. Perfect
Mhm.
at WrestleMania 5. So, yeah, I think that earlier rendition of the Blue Blazer, I don't think he was happy about it.
No.
So I think that's why he decided I need something different. And he decided to do, I think what a lot of wrestlers do nowadays is explore other options when their contracts
Mhm.
run out. And
Yeah.
so obviously going to that, he leaves WWF and he goes without the Blue Blazer gimmick. He just goes back to Stampede up until 89 when it shuts down. And then, he goes back to New Japan Pro Wrestling. And so he also wrestled in WCW, the World Championship Wrestling TV show in 91. And he actually went against a talent named Mark Kyle. And then had another bout with Ricky Morton, if everybody remembers Ricky Morton from
Mhm.
Rock and Roll Express. So he had a singles match against him as well. So then he moves back to the WWF and the new Hart Foundation. What's your initial response to seeing the Hart Foundation like actually together and them saying their family?
I liked it. I remember my grandmother, she never could stand Jimmy Hart. She always thought he was a loudmouth, pipsqueak, and she used a few colorful words to describe him. Over time, though, I was always a fan of the Hart Foundation. I feel like they were one of the best tag teams in the 80s. And I remember becoming, when they teased that the singles term with Bret Hart, I was a Hitman fan. In fact, I remember being at a house show and I yelled, Bret, I love you. And he smiled at me. So that was actually kind of cool. But when the New Heart Foundation started, and I feel like the Anvil, God bless his soul, he was the muscle, like he was the power where Bret was the wrestler. So you had power meets wrestler and you have a tag team. And the thing I thought was interesting is that all of them were family and all of them were a solid unit. And you had the Bulldog, God bless his soul too. You had the Bulldog, you had Owen, you had Neidhart, you had Bret Hart, and then you had Brian Pillman, God bless his soul. I know that's shocking that out of all of the Hart Foundation, four of them are no longer with us. I felt like the four of them together, minus Pillman, was a great group and a great faction because they all shared similar styles and also could work well with each other. Add Pillman to it because Pillman was just interesting and he was unique with his raspy voice and his mannerisms that really balanced it out. And I
Yeah,
thought
no,
those were my favorite factions.
yeah, absolutely. And it's crazy to think that the original Hart Foundation with Brett and Jim, they won tag team gold twice, but when the new
Mhm.
foundation happened, Owen and Jim never won tag titles together.
Yeah.
That's the weirdest thing. It
Mhm.
just they never won the tag titles in the WWF together. It wasn't, I don't think, until 97, I want to say, is when they won tag gold. And the
Mhm.
97 trio included Brett, Jim, Owen, British Bulldog, Brian Pillman, as
Sure.
we had just said. And at that time, too, twice Owen Hart had won the Intercontinental title uh, during that Hart Foundation, the 97 version of it. And with the British Bulldog won the tag titles. And if people remember, I believe that was the same year that Owen Hart won the two Slammies
Mhm.
in 97.
90, yeah, it was 97. I remember that.
Yes, because he was Intercontinental and Tag Team Champion.
Mhm.
And so I think that's when he won both Slammies was in 97, part of the Hart Foundation. He never did that as a solo. It was always with the group.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it was kind of crazy to see that he never won tag gold with basically his brother-in-law or his actual brother, but he
Mhm.
won it with the British Bulldog, which was still family.
Right.
But yeah, no, it's crazy to think that foundation like was very successful, although you would have thought they would have been more successful.
Mm-hmm.
And so, moving on to that, they team up, and then Jim's gone from WWF. Then Owen teamed up with Coco Beware as High Energy. People remember that tag team.
Mm-hmm.
And then after that, he actually suffered the knee injury on one of the tape shows against Bam Bam Bigelow, and he was out for 2 months. And so when he came back, that's when the story of the feud with his brother came to be.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me your initial thoughts on that feud with his brother.
And that was in 98.
93 to 95
Oh, okay.
was
I'm
the
thinking,
feud
okay,
with
never mind.
Brett.
Sorry.
Yes.
Between packing and everything else going on, I'm like, wait, what day is today? It was interesting though as to the feud that they created because that was at WrestleMania 11, I believe.
I
Was that
believe
11,
so.
10 or 11? I think it was 11. It was an interesting feud because it gave older brother versus younger
It
brother,
was 10.
style versus style, very similar. They're both grapplers. They're both, they were trained in the dungeon, for God's sakes. I mean, in Stu Hart, to me, God bless that man's soul, he sounds scary to me as well. So, and again, just like how the intensity of the Hart family when they were in the ring, the intensity in who they were as characters, not so much people, but as characters, it was an interesting feud. And then, if I remember correctly, we also had Camp Cornette, the teaming with Yokozuna, which was an interesting combination, but somehow it fit. And he did well with Cornette. Him and Cornette, I feel like, did some really good work together because Cornette's just one of those people, love him or hate him. He knew how to get over what in character. He knew how to get heat with his promos, and he knew how to rub people the wrong way. And that's what Owen did.
Yeah, I think this feud with his brother is where you actually got to see a little more of a side to Owen, and I was all for it. I loved it. I mean, it all stems from a match at Survivor Series where Owen and Brett collided, and Owen was eliminated, and that's where he
Mm-hmm.
gets the heat with Brett. But the fact that he comes back and he changes his gear to the pink and black tights with the sunglasses and the sharpshooter maneuver, kind of like almost like a not a cheap imitation of what his brother was doing.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that was some of his best work, and where you got to see the true talent of Owen Hart when he feuded with his brother. And so I think what's great is that Owen played the heel so well.
Oh God,
And
yes.
even though, even though he wanted to be cheered, wanted to be all this, the fact that he, went that heel route, obviously because Brett was getting all the fans behind him
Mm-hmm.
at the time. And just the fact that Owen can play to the crowd as the heel. And his match with Brett against the Quebecers at the Royal Rumble.
Oh, the Quebecers, yes. He
Yes,
made him
there was
turn
that
into the
tag
monkey.
match for the tag championships.
Yeah.
Him and Brett wrestled against them in '94, and so he was trying to get Owen tagged, and during that, like when the ref stopped, Owen kicked Brett's leg when it was hurt, and that just right there, when you're kicking a man with one leg, like you're already gonna get heat, and he played off of that.
Mm-hmm.
It's just so great. And honestly, that to me was probably the best feud in '94 WWF was Owen and Brett. And for me, the fact that he was on his own and didn't have the manager at the time, like you said, he had Cornette at one point, but when he was on his own, I liked it. He really found his tone on the mic and against his brother.
Mm-hmm.
And I know we did talk about that match on our WrestleMania history episodes, at WrestleMania 10, that Owen beat him. And later that night, though, Yokozuna wrestled Brett, and Brett beat Yokozuna for the title.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and I just feel like Owen had the opportunity there to be pushed to the moon. Do you think Owen at that time would have been a great heel champion?
To a degree, yes. With a lower belt, yes. The championship belt, not so much, because I felt like he was just missing something, and I can't figure out what that was. It was just like I felt like he needed more time to develop his character. But I think if Owen, again, if we didn't have, the stunt from the rafters and Owen was still with us, he would have retired as a champion. And at some point, he would have been a great champion. Then, no, because he still had to work on a couple things, I feel like. And one of them just was I feel like, his ability to connect with the crowd to a degree and to really put more strength into that heel character. But eventually, over time, he would have been one of the best champions they ever had.
Yeah, I think I keep saying it a lot on this show when we talk about mid card wrestlers that would have been great champions. I always say Owen,
Yeah.
just because I don't know. It's because he didn't want to get involved in the backstage politics at the time going on, and it was his brother that was heavily involved in it
Mhm.
backstage and basically running it and being the champ and all that. And like Owen just didn't want to be involved because I guarantee you there was someone backstage that said, "Listen, we love you, Brett, but what if your brother won the title from you, and then we can continue?" And Brett probably said, "Nah, he's not ready."
Yeah.
Or someone else said, "No, he's not ready." Like Vince. Vince could have been like, "No, Owen's not ready." Brett's our guy. Brett's going to be our face for the Canadian crowd and all that stuff. So I do think if ran right, I do think Owen probably would have been a good champion for a decent run. I'm not saying keep it for a year or anything like that. Maybe a few months, and have some good matches with Brett, and always find a way to sneak out a victory against your brother until Brett wins it as the fan favorite and gets back in front of the crowd. And Owen says, "All right, my job's done." Um, but that summer of '94, I think, is peak Owen Hart. I mean, of
Hmm.
course, he wins the King of the Ring tournament in '94
Hmm.
and becomes the moniker the King of Hearts. I think that's where it was great. And that was the summer of Hart versus Hart, of him and Brett.
Hmm.
They had the steel cage match at SummerSlam. They had the lumberjack match. Uh, and then, Survivor Series. Um, he cost Brett the title against Bob Backlund of all people. You
Hmm.
know, so I think just the feud between Brett and Owen, I think I think was one of the best things ever in WWF during that time. I mean, I can't think of any other thing going on in WWF between '94 and '95 other than Brett versus Owen. Just because they had so many good matches. And, obviously the feud ended at like 95 after Brett beat him one more time, and
Hmm.
then we move on to what you were talking about, Camp Cornette, with Owen Hart. And uh, that pairing was very interesting to me of seeing Owen Hart and Jim Cornette, but I couldn't think of anybody better than Jim Cornette to
No.
manage someone like Owen Hart because of both their personalities. Owen Hart being the "I'm better than everybody," blah blah blah. Here's my manager to prove it, and Cornette with the racket and everything like that,
Yes.
and just like him teaming with Yokozuna, like that pairing was great, because that was also interesting because you had two. Well, at that, not a lot of people know now, but at that time you had two great families actually working together:
Hmm.
the Anoa family, Yokozuna, and the Hart family. So I mean, it's so funny to think that history is almost like, I'm not saying repeating itself, but like families are colliding again with both, The Rock and Cody again, setting up something in the future. and then you have Owen with, Yokozuna. So I'm like, I know we talked about it, but I want to get your feel of the idea of that group and just his time with that group.
Well, fun fact, and I found this out on WW Network too, they do have old episodes from the 80s of WCW Saturday Night with Tony Schiavone and David Crockett other. So it's kind of cool. And I was actually watching one of them the other day, and anytime Cornette came on, I can remember Midnight Express, Emmy won Beautiful Bobby and Loverboy Dennis Condrey with, Jim Cornette, and also Emmy too, which was Bobby Eaton and Stan Lane. And anytime Cornette came on, it was like he had this charisma that you just wanted to listen to what he had to say. Even though his voice was really high pitched, it was very shrill. It was, when and I took music classes. When you sing, you always want to come from your diaphragm. If you come from up here, it's going to be very throaty. But there's a way to talk like that if you can do it without making it sound awful. But Cornette was one of those guys that you were just drawn to him. He played the spoiled rich kid. He always had his mama on the phone. He had the phone and the tennis racket. And I can remember just watching Cornette, and when I was that age, growing up, in grade school, middle school, and I was just enamored with him. And Cornette was always one of the best talkers, whether it was in the ring or a commentary. Well, then you put him with Owen Hart, you put him with Yoko, you had Vader as part of that group as well. I think, yeah, Vader was part of that group as well. And it just fit. It was awkward, but it fit. And Cornette there, I think, he also gave Owen that ability to be a better heel by giving him those mannerisms and that body language, which is essential to be a heel. And the only people that never needed to do it, obviously, were Hall and Nash, the Outsiders, because they were just the cool bad heels, much like the Freebirds were. But Cornette was just something on his own as a heel, in a separate class from anyone else, from any heel manager that's ever been around, or even heel character.
Yeah, no, I vaguely remembered the group that Jim Cornette actually managed. I was still a fan of Owen during that time, and that was the time when him and Bulldog won titles.
Mm-hmm.
And then it was funny because I remember someone like conning Cornette into signing those contracts over to them after they won them. I can't remember the guy's name.
I don't remember. Was it and was it 96, 97?
It was 96.
The Jackal, maybe? Don Callis played the Jackal.
Clarence Mason.
That's it.
Clarence Mason, that's who it was. He conned to sign the contract over.
I'm visualizing it in my head right now.
Yeah, I kind of remember. Yes, I remember Clarence Mason because he also went by Jay Biggs in WCW from 99 to 2000.
Yeah,
that's why I remember him. But yeah, no, it was kind of lost in my memory of Owen Hart factions. And again, I'm with Jason in the comments here. I also miss Vader.
I do too.
I thought he was very underutilized for a big guy. But yeah, no, I remember that vaguely. I know at the time they were also in dissension between him and Bulldog. They were feuding over the newly invented European title that was just created, and Bulldog won it. Obviously, and then obviously they, lost the tag titles at some point during that. I also remember Brett kind of getting in between that again, kind of almost reigniting something between Bulldog and Owen. And he actually just turned heel. Brett did, and now he's going back to work with his brother and Bulldog.
Mhm.
So, and that's where we get into that new Hart Foundation that's created, the
Right.
97 iteration. And it's they become the anti-American established
Mhm.
new Hart Foundation with both, him, Jim, and Brian Pillman. And so this is where we get a weird different turn on Owen. Owen gets like this almost like kind of spiky out, like blonde hair, and he changes his hairstyle a little bit for the new Hart
Yeah.
Foundation, trying to get
Mhm.
more edgy. And so it's it's one it's one goal to another because now Owen moves into winning the Intercontinental title from Rocky Maivia. So I mean, I know we talked about a little about it. What are more fond memories do you have of that Hart Foundation in '97 with Owen?
I think it was the Heart Foundation of the 80s. And I'm thinking back to, matches at the Boston Garden. The Boston Garden always had that like gold looking floor. Toronto, it was the Toronto Maple Leaf had the one where you walked out that runway to the ring that was like part of the ring. And as I watched those matches, I'm just thinking as to how the Hart Foundation were just characters. You were characters. They weren't really cartoonish, such as like Coco Beware or Demolition or Rick Rude or Jake the Snake Roberts or the Honky Tonk Man. They weren't like those cartoonish characters, but they also were very similar to the Killer Bees, B. Brian Blair, Jim Brunzell. You had the Can-Am Connection, Rick Martel and Tom Zink, who later turned into Strike Force. You had the Islanders, Haku and Thomas. So you had gimmicks, but you weren't cartoony. The difference, Adam, that I felt between that Hart Foundation was they were more of like a lighthearted foundation. Like when I say lighthearted, it was just like a lighter version. With this uh 97, the 96, 97 version, we had the leather jackets, number one. You had the intensity. And I think at that point, oh, there she goes. At that point, you had, WWE going after more edgy storylines, edgier characters, not the cartoonish things that we had seen back in the 80s. So that was one of the differences. And I do remember Owen's hair because it was like shaved on the sides and it was short and spiky, which basically, well, you don't have any hair, but for something like that, you're going to use gel because that's going to make it sticky. And it was an interesting look for Owen. It was edgier. And it fit his personality more than his long shag that he had.
Yeah, and this was also during the time where he feuded with Austin. This was another great
Yeah,
feud.
I remember that.
This actually led up to the botched pile driver at SummerSlam.
Is that the one where Austin had the neck issues?
That was the neck issues. That was the botched.
Oh, yes.
Yep,
Okay,
it was the
sure.
botched pile driver and hit him on top of the head, injuring his neck, and that's kind of caused the neck injuries that followed Austin through his career. Obviously, it was an accident. Owen always, I think people have always said Owen is always safe in the
Yeah.
ring in his career. So obviously a botch move. And obviously they called it on the switch. I don't know if they call it on the switch. I think it was always the plan that Austin won the title, but because he had to vacate it because of the neck injury,
Mhm.
and even though it was an accident, they continued to kind of put Owen in that light of Owen wearing the shirt. The After Austin's 316, he started wearing the Owen 316. I just broke
Yeah.
his neck, and so he was entered in that tournament to crown a new champion, and he actually beat Farouk at the end of that tournament with Austin's help. But Austin came back and says, I want to beat you straight up and didn't want Farouk or anyone else to beat
Mhm.
you because I want to wrestle you again. And so basically that carried over to Survivor Series of when Owen wrestled Austin for the title, and he lost the title to Austin. And so that night was also crazy because it was the night of the Montreal Screwjob. So, my thought is always like, I don't think Owen, I don't know what Owen's thought process was that during that whole time with Brett and Vince and the Montreal Screwjob. I guess I'll ask you, and this is just from our perspective of what we think he was. What do you think went through Owen's head during that whole thing?
The Montreal Screwjob was, that was like you're going down 290, through inbound towards downtown, and you get to the, you've got a smooth ride, and then you get past that exit for 294 heading south to Indiana when everything backs up. That's just like, oh my gosh, don't even get me started on that part of 290. But it's kind of like you're driving along, you're going, and then all of a sudden it's just comes at you. And I think the Montreal Screwjob was just an interesting it was an interesting thing that happened because it was not only part storyline, but it was also part non-storyline, because you had Brett and HBK who hated each other backstage. You had the Sunny Days comment. You had supposedly Brett had that affair with Sunny type thing. Then supposedly you had HBK that had an affair with Sunny. And it was just an interesting storyline because Brett was so loyal at that point to WWE. And Vince treated him good, or so we thought. And I wonder too, Owen was probably thinking, okay, what do I do now? Do I stay or do I go? And I often wonder how Owen was feeling about that, given that his brother was literally treated like garbage and essentially played in favor of HBK.
Yeah, it's very hard. I think also at that time, I believe Bulldog and Jim, I think they were granted their release to go to WCW. I don't know if Owen was able to leave because of his obligations for his contracts. I think because he had a contract that he couldn't get out of, and so he was kind of stuck in that contract. But yeah, I think, still his brother, still family, so I'm sure he felt uncomfortable still being there. But I think based on the Dark Side of the Ring episode of Owen, I think a lot of people said he was just he just needed to make money for his kids and his wife,
right.
And so I think he just said, you know what, it's good money here. I'll stay here, even though, I'm maybe not happy here, but I'll work here and just put food on the table. And it was weird because that transition between that and being literally the only Hart left on the roster. There was nobody left on the Hart family still in WWF at that time. And so, I was shocked because I was also watching the pay-per-view because he wasn't mentioned or seen on TV at all for a while. And then it wasn't until the pay-per-view D-Generation X in Your House, which I was watching at the time. I had ordered that. I ordered a lot of pay-per-views. Well, let's just say my parents did. I didn't have the money, but my parents would order the pay-per-views. And I remember that pay-per-view because the main event was Ken Shamrock wrestling Shawn Michaels for the title.
I love Ken Shamrock.
Ken Shamrock actually won the match by DQ, but didn't win the title. And so I remember I was like, dude, like Shawn won again. And then someone attacked Shawn, and I'm trying to see who it is. And to my shock, it was Owen. I was like, what the, wait, that's Owen Hart.
And that was in 98.
That was 97. That was 97. That was
okay, that would have been
in Your House was 19. Yeah.
It would have been like December 97-ish
after
the Montreal Screwjob.
Yes, it was December. It was the December pay-per-view for WWF.
Okay, yeah, you're right. Okay.
And he became a fan favorite at that time. and he's got the antisocial attitude. But then at that point, he actually became known as the Lone Heart or the Black
Mhm.
Heart. Uh,
Yes, you're
and
right.
actually, he started feuding with DX. And do you remember which faction he joined to feud with D-Generation X?
Oh, brother. Because I remember because I remember obviously that's Rick Rude was gone at that point, and
Mm-hmm.
I wish they would have kept him, but it is what it is. I remember the flag incident with HBK when he was just acting goofy. I don't remember which faction he joined to feud with them.
It was Nation of Domination.
Oh, okay, yeah, 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 you're right.
He,
Okay,
him and Ken were going against Mark and Rocky, then known as The Rock, and he turned on Shamrock. And
I remember
so he
that.
became a heel again, and he became a co-leader with The Rock of Nation Domination. And his famous quote, if people remember, was, "Enough is enough. It's time for a change." And so him and
Yeah,
Nation feuded with DX.
yeah,
And
I remember
so
that.
DX parodied him um, in their group thing where they came out dressed as Nation, and the guy came out and would say, "I'm not a nugget."
That's
And
it. I remember that. Yes,
yes,
that was
that's
it.
why my screen name is the Bearded Nugget, just in honor of
Okay.
that little tidbit. But no, it was so to anybody mentioning it was a mention of Shawn Michaels referring to Owen as a nugget of poop
Uh-huh.
in a toilet bowl that no matter how many times he
You
flushes,
flushed it.
you can't get rid of it.
Yeah, I
So it
remember that.
became the
Yeah,
term for Hart, and Hart rolled with it.
he really did.
And
Yeah.
I think, and if I remember correctly, I think he got a chuckle of it backstage. I think Owen's like, dude, that's funny. That's just funny. He thought it was funny. But he also thought, okay, maybe they are giving me a hard time because I'm still Brett's brother.
Hmm.
So yeah, so that feud was, I mean, how did you feel about Owen being part of that faction of the Nation?
As I watch the old episodes of Raw, and for a while I remember what episode I was on, and then somehow it reset itself. So now I have to start back from the beginning. And I think I was on the part, oof, what part was I might have been on the part after the Montreal screw job, or sometime when The Rock and Austin were feuding for the IC title, and Austin threw it in the river. That's around the last time I remember watching it. And I remember Owen joining the Nation of Domination, which I thought was really interesting that he was in it. And I think Owen alone as a character, it fit, but it didn't fit. And I feel like he just worked better in a faction. Like he was, because when you think about it, he started off, by himself, and then he left and came back. He was in Camp Cornette. Then he was in that tag team with the Bulldog, and then he was in the new Hart Foundation, and then everyone's gone, and now he's on his own, and then now he's part of the NOD. He was the type of guy that did better in a faction, and I liked it because it was an interesting group, interesting concept. But anything you did with DX back then was pure comedy, because that's what Sean and Hunter were both going for at the time.
Yeah, I think it was just a weird spot for him because again, I don't think they had anything for Owen at all after Brett and Jim and everybody left, and he was basically the last one there. And so I don't know if they had everything, and I'm really intrigued to see whose idea it was to stick him with Nation of Domination.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think he did well because he's someone that just he's good at what he was doing as a
Yeah.
professional, and it was still his job. And he's like, it's still my job. It's still my job to put food on the table for my wife and kids. And, I'll do whatever you guys need me to do. Am I happy about it? No, but I got to do it. Again, this goes back to my original statement of I don't think till this day anybody who had worked with Owen has ever said anything bad about him. And so because he was just a working guy. And so, that kind of fizzled out of nowhere with him with the group, because also the group kind of deteriorated. And then he gets this weird pairing with Jeff Jarrett at the time, with him, Jarrett, and actually at the time Deborah. And from what I remember, they had a storyline where Owen was supposed to have an on-screen affair with Deborah, but he turned it down. And that just shows to you like the clear mindset that Owen had. He's like, nah, I'm not going to do that. Like, he was one of those guys like, dude, I'm not doing that. I have a family. Like, I'm not going to do that. They see that. I don't want them to think less of me.
Right.
So like that. And so, that's another question. I mean, with that, do you think, not going along with a story, do you think also that kind of hurt his chances of kind of moving up on the card at that time? Or do you think they had a different direction going at the time?
I don't think it hurt his chances of moving up at the card, because if you think about the whole, and I'm going to name drop Benoit. If you think about the whole, Kevin Sullivan, Nancy, Benoit thing, and there is something to be said that I almost said Kevin Benoit, sorry, Kevin Sullivan booked his own divorce and wrote his own divorce. And that was back when they paired up Nancy and Chris, and I read somewhere that was Kevin Sullivan's idea for them to appear out and about in public to make this look legit. They ended up falling for each other, got married, and we know the rest of the story. A similar thing with Triple H and Stephanie, how Bruce Pritchard, and I remember saying this when we were doing our WrestleMania shows, how when Chyna broke away from DX and she had those solo matches, you could definitely see a difference in Chyna from that first WrestleMania that she was in the second one. The first one was her getting over her pain, was getting over her initial shock factor that the man that she loved and trusted was now booked in a storyline with the boss's daughter that ended up turning into a real life marriage with 3 kids. So again, I think for that, I think Owen just, you look at him and you could just see behind the eyes. My grandmother used to tell me that there's always, for every pro wrestler, there's a person behind those eyes. I think Owen was a stand-up family guy. I think Owen put his family first, which is why he had his career as long as he did. And you're right, he knew that he had to feed his family, so he was willing to do whatever he asked. Perhaps he didn't feel comfortable doing the storyline with Deborah because that could have ended up turning real. Martha ends up getting a divorce. Owen marries Deborah, and we don't have Austin and Deborah. So in real life. So I think part of that might have just been perhaps Owen had a conscience that some other performers did not have at that point.
Yeah, I think when it comes to that Attitude Era like crowd, and that the storylines that they presented, I think Owen saw it. It's like, listen, I'm not going to forget my morals while doing this job, and I think that was right by him. I think for that, I think it was right by him, and understanding, like, I understand it's a storyline, but also like, no, like for me, it's immoral, and he stood by his beliefs, and that's the thing you notice today, I guess, is people stand by their beliefs, and you're not going to change people's beliefs, So I think at that time, Owen, as much as maybe it would have boosted him a little bit and maybe made him look in a different light to the crowd, and maybe they might have cheered him. They're like, dude, yeah, you got Deborah away from Jeff. Like, yeah, buddy, like that. And maybe gone ultra face with the crowd at that time. It could have, but his morals stood out, and I respect the guy for that. And it was also at this time that he kind of re-engaged the Blue Blazer character at the same time he was teaming with Jeff Jarrett. And so there was times when he would show up as the Blue Blazer, but this time he was a heel, and basically against like all the Attitude Era characteristics of what was going on. He hated it all. He's like, we got to get rid of this filth on TV, blah, blah, blah. I'm here to help all you people forget this. I'm your hero and all that stuff. And I loved it. Everyone's like, oh, that's Owen, because he had technically quit WWF, even though he came back wearing the blue blazer, you know? But then he did it, and then Jeff Jarrett appeared next to him as the blue blazer. And at one point, his former partner, Coco Beware, donned the blue blazer costume. So I guarantee you this is the time when Owen's like, dude, this is funny. Like, all three of us are wearing it. Like, I didn't like it the first time around. Let's all just make it what it is now. And so this was also the time he won the titles again with Jeff Jarrett. As we had discussed in our WrestleManias, him and Jeff won the titles and successfully defended them at WrestleMania 15. And so, but then they lost the titles. And so that's when Hart kind of was doing a balance of both the blue blazer and still team with Jeff Jarrett, because he was also in that feud with, the Godfather for the Intercontinental title. And so we build that up, and we get to the event of where we tragically lost Owen. Mm-hmm. And it must have been really hard for that crowd to see what was going on. And so, because on camera, we couldn't see anything, obviously. When I was watching a pay-per-view, they were on Jim Ross. Jerry the King had already gone to the ring to see what was going on. Mm-hmm. And it was just surreal, because JR is like, hey, we had a misfortune here. Owen Hart, who was supposed to come down from the rafters as a blue blazer, fell, and he's hurt badly. I do remember them showing the crowd, painting the crowd of the whole incident, and it was just so surreal to me. And I know we already talked about where we were, but we never talked about how we felt when it was going on. So to you, Danny, how were you feeling, even after the news came across of his passing? How did you feel knowing that he was injured during a live show?
So there's a few times, and I've said this before, for the new viewers, there's who might have missed this. There's a few times that I legit cried as a fan. And a lot of people have said, oh, she watches wrestling. Well, something's wrong with her. Or, oh, you watch wrestling. Ha, ha, ha. I do watch wrestling. And I'm a girl who loves wrestling. And fellas, like I said, you got a girl that likes wrestling. She's a keeper. But yeah, there's times that I cried. And I remember hearing about this, and I think once the initial shock value wore off for me, it was like, oh my God, he's here and he's not coming back. I had tears. And that, as a fan, was one time that I cried. Eddie was 2. Edge's retirement in 2011 was 3. Roman Reigns' leukemia announcement was 4. Edge's return in 2020 was 5, and Bray was 6. Because for the simple reason is that we don't know where Owen could have gone. It's like when you're playing Super Mario. Remember the original Super Mario on the NES, and you're, controllers, and you had like whatever to jump, and the big question marks when you'd hit the question mark and you never knew if it was a coin or if a mushroom would pop up out and you'd have to catch the mushroom to make you bigger. Mm-hmm. There's the big question mark going into this, because we don't know where Owen would have gone with this. We don't know what he would have become had he not decided to do the stunt of the blue blazer and everything that happened. And I think it was just the shock value that it happened, but then it was also the fact that they, if I remember, didn't they continue the event, or they didn't want to stop it or something, or what was that? And then who was Owen supposed to face that night?
He was supposed to face the Godfather for the Intercontinental title.
Yeah.
And if I remember correctly, someone had mentioned that Owen was supposed to win the title from the Godfather that night. And so that would have been crazy to see. But yes, I remember that, and watching the episode, watching the episode Dark Side, as it was explained by Martha, his widow, the harness he was using was different from the ones he had been using for the gimmick before. And he, he was supposed to be entangled just above the ring and then hit that quick release and fall flat on his face in the ring for funny, for a comic spot. But he accidentally, according to Martha, he was trying to get comfortable, he accidentally hit it. But the way it was designed, it shouldn't have happened the way it was designed, according to Martha. And so, and the show did continue on, to answer your question. They did the announcement. JR did the announcement on screen. It was not part. I remember distinctly. He's like, "This is not part of the show. This is not a storyline. Blah blah blah. This is a real situation." He was transferred, and he says, "And I have the unfortunate news to give you that Owen Hart has died." And so, it was very surreal to see that on screen for me. I was like, "What?" And they kept going. And actually, if you watch later on the main event of that show, Undertaker was wrestling a match. And if you can see, Undertaker literally was standing there shaking. And literally he's literally almost like eyeing the spot Owen fell on of where he was hurt. And you can see like Undertaker's face. He's almost in tears because he's like, we lost Owen and we're still doing a show. It's hard, but also it's thing that I think is, at the time, I don't know what Vince was thinking. Maybe it was, we've got more of a show to do. This is probably what Owen would have wanted us to do, is keep going, just because based on how Owen was.
Right.
Owen was that kind of guy. Owen was the like, I'm here for the team. I don't care what it is, even though if it's embarrassing. I know he didn't like the Blue Blazer character before, but if he wanted to keep the job and make money for his family, he was going to do it again. And, he had done it multiple times, the harness, bit, and it's been fine every time. But this harness, according to Martha, was a different harness. So do you think if it was the same setup as he had been doing prior, do you think we wouldn't even be talking about Owen in this light?
I think, it's, it's kind of like routines. And I've said this before too. It's like, having the routines, for children, same routine teaches consistency. If we would have had consistency with that, or they would have done the practice stunts, or, did more practice stunts, or the same harness, something that he knew and could trust, I don't think this would have happened. And again, I mean, you look at HBK coming in on the zip line, WrestleMania 12. I mean, that would have been, think back to that. That would have been something. Look at Sting coming out of the rafters on Nitro. That would have been, something right there too, if he would have, sadly missed. And thank God he didn't. But I think, again, too, consistency is key. Trust is key. If he would have used the same harness and practiced this a few more times before, they, really, actually set up the match or whatever, I don't think he'd still be alive today.
Yeah, it's crazy to think that that if it had gone different, I think Owen would still be around today as either a producer or, as a manager somewhere, or heck, he could have been creative somewhere at another, imagine him in AEW working as a producer. I think that would have been where we'd be at now, had this accident not happened. And, unfortunately it is what it is. And, it's very sad because, again, it was live and he was one of my favorite wrestlers growing up.
Yeah.
And, he left behind his wife and kids, and it just must have been hard for them. And the legacy that he's left behind now is so respected. Obviously, following that, Jeff won the title off the Godfather, a Raw after that in May. And after he did that, he actually screamed Owen's name after he won it. And I remember watching that, and I teared up because Jarrett was crying. I think Godfather was crying because, again, Owen was probably supposed to win that title at Over the Edge. And so, and then while his brother was in WCW, he wrestled Chris Benoit in honor of Owen, and they did it in the same arena that he passed away at. So I think that was kind of respectful and crazy to think that's where he wrestled in honor of Owen, knowing what went on with Chris, years later. So obviously the lawsuit happens for the Hart family against, both, WWF and, the manufacturer and all that stuff. And then, obviously you see the background on my screen. They create the Hart Foundation. And so it's, if nobody knows what the Hart Foundation is, I'm going to read you a little bit what it does here. It is a Calgary-based charity that provides university college scholarships for children in need, as well as housing for low-income families. So that is what the Owen Hart Foundation is all about for that area in Canada. I think it's awesome. That's what Martha used some of the funds, settlement funds from that lawsuit for, was to set up that foundation, which I think it was great because it was for Owen. Owen, based on the Dark Side of the Ring, loved his kids. And obviously, reading about the legacy of Owen, Fox Sports, dubbed him a genius. He would be considered one of the greatest professional wrestlers of our time by many industry colleagues. Obviously, he had many documentaries released. And actually, interesting fact, if nobody knows, Kevin Owens named his son after Hart, after Owen, and incorporated the name as an own ring as a tribute to both of them.
Yes.
Obviously, we talked about it already. AEW does the Owen Hart Cup tournament in honor of Owen Hart. And so I think it is without saying that Owen did leave a great impression. I mean, you just think of some of his accomplishments. He's a class of 2022 for the Canadian Pro Wrestling Hall of Fame. Pro Wrestling Illustrated, he won many awards. WWE and Stampede won awards for titles. WWF, he won many titles. So I think what we got to remember is that it's about the connection someone makes with their fans, and Owen did that as a face or a heel. He connected with the fans either way, and he's a family guy. I think that's another thing is he's family and just very family oriented, and leaving behind Martha and his two kids. It's sad, to think that today, man, he would have been 59 years old, because he passed away at 34, so he would have been 59 years old. He would have still been around.
Yeah.
But we're getting to the hour and 15 minutes here. So what else would you like to? Is there anything that you would like to say, Danny, about Owen's legacy and what it meant to you, and some of the best memories you have of it?
He was unique. He was unique because he had his own personality. He wasn't compared to the Hitman. He wasn't compared to the Anvil, and those are obviously his brother-in-law. And then didn't the British Bulldog married one of the Hart daughters? Am I right?
I believe so.
Yeah, Georgia, I think, or one of them. I don't remember. So he was similar to his brothers-in-law, if you would. But he was also the same as his brother-in-laws because they were trained, obviously in the dungeon, very similar style. He was one of a kind. He was that guy that you wanted to listen to, but the guy you wanted to mute at times at the same time because he was so high strung. He's kind of like, I see, and ironically too, and I did read that somewhere that Kevin Owens named his son Owen and adopted the stage name. Owens obviously is a trip to Owen Hart. And Kevin Owens is another one that I love when he talks. I could listen to that guy talk all day. He's so entertaining. And I see a little bit of Owen Hart in Kevin Owens. So kind of like little bits and pieces, especially when he gets high strung. But other than that, I mean, if Owen Hart were still alive today, he could teach, people on how to get over with the crowd. He could teach them how to connect. He could teach them how to do promos, and he'd be good at it.
Yeah, I think, and to answer your question, Dave Smith, the British Bulldog, was married to Diana.
Okay, that's right.
Georgia.
Okay.
He was married to Diana's
Yeah.
Hart. So, but yes, I think today, I think at 59, I don't think Owen would still be wrestling, or maybe he will. Maybe he would be. We never know. He might have, still been in that wrestling shape, or he might have been like, my body can't take it anymore. Let me just coach or manage or, produce.
If Shamrock can do it at 60,
oh yeah,
and Sting can do it at 60,
and Billy Gunn can still do it at 56. So it's like, I think Owen could still probably be a great coach somewhere if he was around today. But, talking about it, it's just like, I wanted to do this episode. Obviously, you gave me the idea because you had mentioned it in the group chat. And I thought, wow, it really is going to be 25 years since we lost Owen.
Yeah.
And today is the 25 years. And so I figured we had to do an episode like this. And, if it would have been on Tuesday, we probably would have done it for AZ Canada. But it's today. So I was like, falls on Thursday. Let's talk about it.
Let's do it.
And Owen did leave a legacy for a lot of people that grew up with him and watched him, especially him coming through, the Hart Dungeon and Stampede Wrestling. And I mean, I think if you ask any Canadian wrestling fan, they're going to add Owen Hart to their top 3 wrestlers of all time from Canada. I think there's no doubt about it. And even I did. I mean, when we were on an episode of Elite, Canada, and Connor's like, hey, let's talk about our top Canadian wrestlers since it's the Canada show. I told him, I said, number one's Owen. For me, Owen Hart. I think Owen Hart was the epitome of a Canadian in professional wrestling. He had the walk, he had the talk, he had the attitude, he had the look. And I mean, the guy could do it. And the fact that he was never a world champion, it mind boggled me so much. And I talk about it all the time. I say it all the time. When someone asks me what professional wrestler was a mid-card wrestler that never won a world title that you would have loved to see, and I always tell them Owen Hart.
Yeah.
I said Owen Hart down, hands down. I would have loved to see being a world champion because he would have done so much with that title. He would have had so many good matches with it, whether it be continuing his feud with his brother or having matches with the British Bulldog for it, or even feuding with other people. I guarantee you the fact that man, again, my shirt shows it, can hold 2 Slammies and a title at the same time, the man deserved to hold a world title. And so, today, we honor Owen Hart, and we do miss him. I mean, me especially, thinking about it, like I said, it's going to be an emotional, sentimental episode, and I'm getting a little sentimental. I'm getting a little emotional. I'm not going to cry on screen, guys. Sorry, I'm not going to do it. But I'm a grown man, damn it. But we do miss Owen, and we always are showing our support for Martha and the kids. Grown kids now, but we still show support. And the fact that AEW is still showing the love for him with the Owen Hart tournament,
absolutely.
That is what I love about it. I think anytime they do the tournament, I'm excited because I'm like, I love Owen Hart. I love that they're doing the tournament. I love the fact they always bring Martha on, and she's like, we're doing it for him, and because you guys got to remember, Martha wanted nothing to do with professional wrestling for a while.
Yeah, no. And then what episode, Adam, refresh my memory, and I've seen all of the Dark Side of the Ring episodes. What episode or what season is that Owen episode?
I want to say 3.
Okay, I'm going to have to go back and watch that again.
Let me double check before you quote me on it.
And today, too, the irony is that today's Bray's birthday, I think.
At season 2. Season 2.
Okay, now I'm gonna go
Season 2, episode 10.
Okay.
It is called The Final Days of Owen Hart. That entire season is actually a really good season 2. So, but yeah, that's season 2, episode 10.
Yeah, today is Bray Wyatt's birthday, and he was 12 years old the day Owen died.
Yeah, no, and that's another thing too. So it's just crazy to think that Bray's birthday falls on the 25th anniversary of Owen. So
yeah,
we kind of honor both of them now because both of them are the genius minds in professional wrestling. And if anybody can, if you want, you can donate to the Owen Hart Foundation. I don't know how that translates from American dollars to Canadian dollars, but I'm sure there's a method. Yeah, no, I'm glad we did this. I was very excited to do this. And Danny, I do thank you for coming on and talking with me. You know, I kind of started the show off by myself for 5 minutes, but then you jumped on. I was like, that's cool. I knew someone was going to jump on. It's okay.
Yeah, where is everybody?
I don't know. Connor
was
running behind.
Hi,
it's fine. So, but want to thank everybody for the comments. Jason, thank you. Charles, thank you. Everybody that was watching us. If you guys missed the episode, after we're done here, if you want to go back, rewatch it, please go back, rewatch it. We talk about his career and everything. And then also, you know, make sure you hit that subscribe, the like button. You know, follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, you know, Twitch, YouTube. We're all over the place. We do have a lot more stuff coming your guys' way. Obviously, I don't know if we'll have it Saturday, but we may have a live reaction to Collision Rampage. I'm not sure. I know Connor was talking about if he was or not, or if that's too much. And then obviously, you know, Wednesdays we do our live reaction to Dynamite. Tuesdays is our AEZ Canada show with Matt. Matt hosts great shows. Him and I have been kind of tag teaming it recently, so make sure you join us there. As well as always here every Thursday, 7 o'clock here on Talking Elite. We do have some guests coming on. I'm not going to announce them yet because we're still finalizing them, but we do have guests coming on here soon, so make sure you guys stay by.
Hold on.
I don't know what Danny's showing.
Oh, I can't get my screensaver.
Oh, okay.
Sorry, we want Wardlow.
Okay. Apparently Danny wants Wardlow as a guest on this show. We can ask him why he doesn't get utilized as much.
Thank you. Exactly. And where does he buy his suits? Because I want to use his credit card and buy him a couple with his credit card and get myself maybe a Gucci bag.
Maybe a Gucci bag. That'll look great on him on AEW television. But Danny, thank you for joining me and talking Owen Hart. We miss him. I think he's one of the wrestlers we miss very dearly, even 25 years later, talking about him. He left quite a legacy and it's still going strong today. So again, thank you guys all for watching. Thank you guys for joining us.
Bye, everybody.
And as always, have a good night, guys. So thank you.
Good night.